So, what is empathy? Most people define empathy as the ability to imagine yourself in someone else's shoes. And it makes sense, but it's kind of silly. I think because in elementary school we were always taught to just value empathy because we value empathy, and you had to be an upstander instead of a bystander. And imagine someone else who's getting bullied. Like what would you do, and how would you empower them, or how would you know, make things better at school or something. But it takes away the actual value of empathy itself, because then people are like, why should we be empathetic? I think a better definition that's slightly more serious is, to the ability to accurately reflect, portray, or feel, understand other people's emotions in their situation. And why is it good? Because that's how you connect with people. I think, when you can validate their feelings and understand where they're coming from in any case, you can become closer and you can relate to people from any cultural, socioeconomic, religious, racial, ethnic, etc. background. And I've seen so many moments where a lack of empathy just totally blows up an entire situation. There was this one time in high school where I was on the mock trial team. It was a freaking club, but they treated it like it was a competitive sports team, or like it was a professional like investment banking firm. And so I told my higher up attorney that I couldn't make the state finals, right? Apparently they didn't get that message, or someone forgot or something. And the morning of the competition, they were chasing, looking for me at school at 7:30 when they were supposed to leave. And then they finally found me, and that teacher that was chaperoning the entire trip totally went ape shit and yelled at me like crazy. He's like, "What are you doing? Like, why would you decide to ditch last minute? Why didn't you tell anyone?" And then I don't know. Then I just went back to class, and I felt like that day was shitty. And then the lead attorney, she didn't like me from the start, and so then she used that opportunity to just totally say a bunch of nasty things about me. Then the whole team got really mad at me and basically almost kicked me out. And they were refusing to hear anything I had to say, even though it was really just a misunderstanding between all of us. And then I ended up quitting. So thanks for coming to my TED Talk. But yeah, that's an example of how, you know, a lack of empathy can just lead to totally burning all the bridges. And that's not good. But also, on the other hand, I think we kind of misconstrue how a healthy version of empathy is portrayed in a relationship. Because we think of empathy as, you always support somebody and you can always understand them and validate every decision that they make, right? But I feel like if you keep doing that, that will just lead to fueling delusion in others, right? Like, let's say we take an example. Someone had an affair. Totally normal. Well, not normal, but it's common. Um, let's say someone was trapped in a relationship and they felt like there was too much conflict that went unresolved and they couldn't figure it out to save their relationship. And so, what one person does when they do that is to cheat with somebody else, cheat on someone with some other person. And while one can understand how that person got to that point of cheating, right? But does that make the cheating good? Or does that validate the decision of cheating? No, because you can always figure things out. And so I think empathy in that way, right? Once it starts validating those decisions where it's clearly it's clearly a mistake on someone's behalf, that's when the empathy gets out of control. And so that's why I think empathy, as long as there's boundaries to that empathy, in any relationship, it will allow both people to prosper. I watched this Star Wars series, Clone Wars, The Bad Batch, if anyone knows what that is. Um, and they're on this team of like five different people, and one person, kind of falls to like the dark side, right? But they still end up saving that person later on in the series. And so, you know, when this girl saves him, he was like, "Why did you defend me, or why did you stand up for me?" And she was like, "Just because I understand you doesn't mean I agree with you." And that's kind of what spoke to me and what made me want to talk about this in the first place. Because, understanding doesn't mean agreeing. And I think empathy with boundaries allows you to have the understanding in others, but also acknowledging when people are wrong and that they have to atone or do something differently next time. And I think that's what leads to true growth. Because, yes, everyone wants a mirror. Everyone wants somebody that can just validate everything and understand everything that they've done, their life, etc. But I think being a good person and being a real friend, real partner, etc., also constitutes, you know, giving them the truth, and telling people when they're wrong. Right, no one wants to have that conversation. But I think it's an essential aspect of a relationship.